The Goldwater Institute recently filed a lawsuit against the Arizona Department of Water Resources on behalf of the Home Builders Association of Arizona. The claim that the department's groundwater regulations on new home developments are unconstitutional. Joining us now is John Riches. He is the Vice President for Litigation at the Goldwater Institute. Of note, we will hear from the other side of this issue on Thursday. Good to have you here today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
You betcha. Why'd you file the lawsuit?
Well, the main reason is because what ADWR did here represents the single largest bureaucratic power grab in Arizona's history. They've effectively halted all new home construction in some of the fastest growing and most affordable parts of the valley, including Buckeye and Queen Creek. And the way that they did it doesn't comply with state law. When these decisions are going to be made, they should be made by our elected lawmakers, not by bureaucrats sitting in an office.
I know that's kind of the crux of the issue, but also at play here is something called unmet demand. What is unmet demand?
Sure. So if a developer or home builder wants to create new housing, they have to demonstrate 100 years of water supply, of assured water supply. And they've always done that historically, and they can do it now. And what the law says is that they have to show sufficient water for the use of the home building. So if there's sufficient water for the development, then the certificate ought to be granted. ADWR has imposed a new rule that says, that essentially turns the legal requirement on its head and says that we don't look at the use, we look at the AMA wide, the management area wide, and if there's not sufficient groundwater in that whole area, then there's insufficient or unmet demand.
So it's for the entire active management area, not just what's underneath the development that's being built.
That's correct.
Okay, this is to all. Are there 5 active management areas in Arizona, something along those lines?
That's my understanding.
Applies to all 5.
This applies. This recent rule applies to Maricopa County.
Just Maricopa County.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, the home builders would say what the approval's okay if the water is available directly underneath. In other words, if you and I are in the same active management area and I want to build here, but that means that the rest of the active management area is going to have some problems with water in the future, you're saying, as it stands, the law allows that.
So it's not what the home builders are saying, it's what state law says.
Yes.
It says that there has to be sufficient groundwater at for the proposed use, so for the homes that are being built.
Is this a response to what you mentioned Maricopa County, but in Pinal County, is this a response by home builders from what happened down there?
Well, this is unrelated in a couple ways. I think what's important to note here is we're talking about some of the fastest growing areas of Phoenix and the greater Phoenix area, and some of the most affordable ones. What happened in Pinal County did not halt all development in the areas where we critically need housing. And as you know, right now we have an immense shortage of housing. We have an affordable housing crisis, and this is compounding that crisis by keeping a supply of housing off the market that ought to be on the market.
But if it is a model, if the Pinal County situation is a model, basically the Department of Water Resources said that groundwater deficiency, it was too large and it was too widespread to allow certain developments. Does that make sense?
There's all sorts of problems with the model, which I think we should talk about.
Please.
But the real first problem is how this was done. If there's going to be a decision in this state that halts all new home construction in the areas where we need it most, that decision has to be made by our elected lawmakers, not by the Director of Water Resources. And more importantly, if that decision is going to be made, it has to be authorized by law. The ADWR failed in both of those requirements. It just made this rule with the stroke of a pen. It didn't go through rulemaking. It didn't allow for public comment. And it didn't follow state law, which says that it's at the site of the proposed use. Nothing in state law authorizes what ADWR did here.
ADWR will say, though, that it dates back to 2017 and Governor Ducey. That's where this whole idea got started and where it progressed. Do they have a point?
Not with respect to what they did here, right? So what they did here, the rule that is at issue here applies to Maricopa County, and that is what has halted development and home building where we need it most.
So the claim is it was imposed without legislative authority. That's really the crux and the bottom line here.
Yeah, it's actually even a step worse than that. It was imposed without even going through administrative rulemaking. So that usually allows people to come and the public to comment. They did it without that. And they did it without legislative authorization.
Let's talk about criticism. There are those that say you're protecting the home builders and the Groundwater Management Act protects homeowners. How do you respond to that?
The Groundwater Management Act protects all of us. And what it says is it allows for a compromise between development and new homes being brought to market. and conservation resources. What's so alarming about what ADWR did here is if conservation of water was their actual goal, this is the wrong way to do it. And the reason for that is because other water uses, say a chip factory or some other commercial use, they don't have to get an assured water supply and they can pump without limitation. Home builders, on the other hand, have a replenishment obligation to put water back in the ground. So if conservation of water resources, and again, there's serious problems with the model, but if that is their goal, this is the wrong way to achieve it.
But they're saying that they're trying to protect current homeowners from developments where it's further afield. They don't even know what's being built, and yet it's effectively affecting groundwater management in that area. Again, is there something to that?
I don't think they have proven that at all. I mean, the model is deficient in so many ways. So the way the model works is they place wells in different areas of the active management area. The department placed wells up on the side of the mountain in areas that were likely to cause a deficiency in those areas. So there is plenty of groundwater across the active management area. But again, I mean, ADWR and us and the home builders can debate all day long about what the right policy is, but it's not for the department to decide. It's for our elected lawmakers to decide. And this sort of overreach can't be tolerated. If the department can do this here, it can do it anywhere.
Okay, so when the department says, though, that this has been a policy in place for years, dating back to the Ducey administration, they would probably suggest, why wasn't this lawsuit filed back then?
Well, because this lawsuit is challenging one of the most significant overreaches that has halted home building where we need it most. Imagine all the people that are coming into Arizona right now looking for homes. Imagine all the middle-income people that are trying to buy a house for the first time. They're looking at places where housing is being built, and the department has shut down the locations where housing is being built most in this state. And that's an extraordinary, extraordinary problem and an extraordinary overreach.
And that brings me to my last question, and I thank you for joining us. I appreciate the conversation here. You said if they wanted to conserve, they would have done this, that, and the other. What do you think they want to do? Do you think they want to stop home building in Maricopa County in Arizona?
It's really hard to say. I mean, this appears to be politically motivated, which is part of the problem, but it's really hard to say. I think if they wanted to do this right, they have to go through rulemaking, they have to allow the public to come in and comment, and they gotta follow state law. If they really want to do this right, they gotta go to the legislature and to our elected lawmakers and get policies in place that make sense for all Arizonans, including those that are just trying to buy a home.
John Riches, Goldwater Institute. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks
We appreciate
so much,
it.
Appreciate it.